sharing, and permissions. With any operating system nowadays, the ability to share files, folders, and other resources is not only important, it's mandatory. I mean, could you imagine not being able to share these sorts of things nowadays? Well, in Windows Vista, Microsoft has given us those same abilities that we have had in Windows XP and tweaked them a little bit, so sharing has been improved. One of the first things you'll come to realize about Windows Vista, if you haven't come across it already, is that by default, Windows Vista comes with file sharing turned off. So if we go and click on Start and click on Network, you'll see this drop-down message here at the top telling us that file sharing is indeed turned off. And then if we go and click on Network and Sharing Center button at the top, down here we can also see that file sharing is currently off. So if we click on this little down arrow icon here on the right hand side, we can then choose to turn it on. Now, whilst most of you listening to this video now are probably using Windows Vista in a domain environment or are likely to have a router with an inbuilt firewall connecting to the internet, some of you may, however, be connecting a regular modem or more likely a broadband modem directly into your computer's Ethernet or USB port. Now, if that's the case, before we get started talking about file sharing, I want to make something clear. Make sure that you only turn file sharing on for the internal network card and not the one that your modem is plugged into. So if we click on this Manage Network Connections link here over on the left, if you're connecting directly to the internet, you'll see more than one network interface listed here. And if we right click on one of our network cards, obviously I've only got one here, and choose Properties, and we'll just click Continue on our user account control message. Now notice that we have file and printer sharing for Microsoft Networks enabled on this network interface. Well, if this was directly connected to the internet via a dial-up or broadband modem, we don't want this box to be checked, since that presents a real security risk, potentially allowing people from the internet access to our files and folders. However, if, like me, you plug your computer into a router or perhaps use Wi-Fi to connect to an access point, then it's fine to leave it turned on. For any internal-facing network interface, it's of course fine to leave this box checked. Now, by the way, if you do have one of your interfaces directly connecting to the internet as I just described, you'll also want to disable Netbios over TCP as well. Just turning off file and printer sharing here isn't enough. So to do that, what we'll do is we'll double click on our IP settings here, or we'll just select that and choose Properties. Then we'll click on the Advanced button, and then at the top we'll choose the Wins tab. Now down the bottom here, we can then choose to disable NetBIOS over TCP/IP, and then simply click on OK. Now again, if this was our internal network card, leaving this turned on is fine, and it's actually required for some services to work. But if this is an internet-facing connection, then shut it off. Alright, well I'm going to go and cancel all of this, since I don't fall into this category, and I'm sure that many of you listening to this video won't either. So let's move on, and we'll start learning about file sharing and permissions. Alright, now, even though down here I showed you that by default file sharing is turned off in a default Vista installation, that's fine. The moment we try and share our first file, we'll be asked to turn it on. So whether you turn it on here, or when you first share a file or folder, it's up to you. So I'll just close this down. We'll leave file sharing off for the moment. And we'll go and click on Start, and we'll click Computer, and we'll just navigate to our C drive, and I'm going to right click, and we'll create a new folder, and I'll just call this folder Sales. Now to share our Sales folder, we'll simply right click on it, and we'll choose Share. And firstly, we'll need to define the users that'll be able to access our shared sales folder. Okay, so the default is to only allow the user account that you're creating this share from access. So since I'm logged on with the trainer account, we can see here that the trainer account has automatically been added with the permission level of owner, which means that this account will have full control over our shared folder. Now, if we click on this account, we can then change the permissions to reader, which allows the user only enough permission to read and execute the files in the share. We could change it to contributor, which allows the user to read, execute, and modify files, but they can't delete them unless they are the creator of a file within this share. Co-owner is basically the same as owner, allowing full control over files and folders within the share so they can read, add, modify, or delete any file in the share. And remove, of course, removes users from this list. So to add other users to our share permissions, we can simply type in the user's account names into this field at the top and then click Add. Now, in our previous video on users and groups, we created two users, Bob and Jane. So to add them to our share permissions, we can simply type in Bob, and then we'll click the Add button, and then we'll type in Jane, and we'll click the Add button again. All right, now there's our two users added with the default permissions of reader, which of course we can change if we like. So let's change, say, Jane to have the ability to modify files. So we'll change her permissions from reader to contributor, and we'll leave Bob, giving him only the read and execute permissions. Now, from this drop-down box at the top, we also have the ability to add in the everyone permission for our share as well, or we can create a new user account if we like. Now, also notice that at the top of the window here, we're told that anyone that wants to access our share that we're creating here will need to have a user account with a password, and in a moment I'll show you why that is. Alright, so we'll come down the bottom, we'll click Share, and we'll have to click on the user account control message, and now we can see that our folder has been shared. Now, as part of the new Vista interface, we're also given the option of emailing this share link to somebody else, and if we click this link, it's simply going to fire up our local email application. And I'm just going to cancel this wizard here because it's firing up Windows Mail and I haven't actually run that configuration yet, so we're just going to cancel that. Now, alternatively, we can also copy this link to our clipboard if we like. Now, for those of you that aren't up to speed with accessing shares, the way you do it is like this. Now, at the top here in this black text, we can see that the share name is Sales, and it's on a folder on Vista Client 01, which is the host name of this computer. However, this presumably has just been put here for readability purposes, since the way you access a share is exactly the way you see it underneath, with our double slash followed by the host name or the IP address of the computer, followed by the share name. And this is referred to as a UNC path. All right, so if we click on the Done button here, and in the address bar at the top here, we'll type in a double slash, followed by the name of this computer, which is Vista Client 01. And since this share that we just created isn't a hidden share, we can see that this address bar here has populated all of the share names that it knows about. So here we can see printers and sales. Now, if we click Sales, this opens up a new folder, and we're now accessing the files inside our sales share. Now, it doesn't matter that I'm actually logged on to this Vista machine at the moment. I could be logged on to any machine in my network and access this computer's sales folder using exactly the same method. Now, something which is new to Windows Vista is the ability to share files as well as folders. Now, previously, you could only share the folder itself, and people would have to access the files inside the shared folder. Now, we can share a single file by itself without sharing the folder, but this only works for files inside your user profile path, or in other words, inside your users folder. So let's just drop back to our desktop for the moment, and I'm just going to right click on my desktop and I'll create a new text document. Now we'll right click on our file, and here you can see we can also choose to share the file the same way as we did when we shared our folder a moment ago. So we'll click share here. Now I'm not going to bother adding any more users or any groups into here. We're just going to click share, and we'll click continue. And now we can see that our file has been shared and would access it in the same way that we'd access any regular shared folder. Okay, now when we created our first share, if you recall, we were told that only users that have a username and password would be able to access our share, and I told you that I'd show you why. So if we go and click on Start, and then fire up Network, and then we'll launch the Network and Sharing Center. Now down here, we have an option for password protected sharing, which as you can see by the green light, it's turned on. Now if you want anyone to be able to access this share, whether they have a password or not, then you'll need to turn this feature off. And what it really does behind the scenes is turns the guest account on. So if we click on Start, and we'll right click on Computer, and we'll select Manage, and we'll continue. Now we'll go and expand local users and groups, and we'll select the users folder. Now over here we can see that our guest account is disabled as it has this little downward pointing arrow. Okay, well if we go back to our Network and Sharing Center, and we'll turn off our password protected sharing, so we'll select the little down arrow here, we'll choose to turn off password protected sharing, and we'll click Apply, and then continue on the user account control message. Okay, now we'll go back to our computer management console again, and if we hit F5 to refresh our screen, now you can see that the guest account has now been enabled, and anyone can now access our share regardless of whether they have a password or not. Although that's not quite true, since if you recall that when we created our sales share, we only explicitly granted permissions to 3 accounts. That was the trainer account, Bob, and Jane. And since we never granted the guest account permissions or granted them to everybody, any user that doesn't have a password still wouldn't be able to access our sales share. But had we have included either of those accounts, then anyone would then be able to access the share. Now if you do want to go and change these share permissions or stop the folder from being shared, you can of course do that as well. So if we go back to our C drive, and we'll right click on our shared sales folder, and we'll choose share again. At the top, we can change our sharing permissions, which also lets us add or remove users from the list, or we can stop sharing this folder altogether. Of course, if we click on change sharing permissions, we'll just come back to the same screen that we saw earlier when we created our share, and you can amend this as you like. So to allow anyone access to this folder, for example, we could simply click on this drop-down box and then choose Everyone, and then click the Add button, and then the Share button at the bottom, and we'll click Continue. Now our sales folder will be accessible to anyone regardless of whether they have a password or not. Alright, now this method of sharing that we've just seen is a new interface in Vista, but we can go back to the older way of sharing as well, and if you want to create hidden shares, we'll need to go back to our old tried and true method. Now you see, if we come back to our network folder here, and then we'll double click on our computer, Vista Client 01, in here we're able to see all shared folders and printers listed here, but this only shows those folders which are not hidden. So here we can see our sales folder, the users folder, and the printers folder. And that's fine, but you may have folders that you wish to share, but not be shown here in this list. And of course, we can do that by creating a hidden share. Okay, so let's go back to our C drive, and I'm going to create a new folder. This time we'll call this one Management, and we'll right-click on our folder, and instead of choosing Share this time, we're going to come down to the bottom and choose Properties, and then we'll choose the Sharing tab. Okay, we have two options here. We can simply share the folder, and this brings up the exact same sharing window we've used before in this video, or we can configure Advanced Sharing. So we're going to click on Advanced, and we'll click Continue. Now the first thing we'll need to do is check this box to share this folder. Now the name of this folder, which of course is called Management, is automatically populated here, and it will become the share name, but we can certainly change this if you like. It doesn't have to be the same name as the folder. You can call this whatever you like. Alright, now as it stands here, if we just simply click on OK, we've just created a basic share. But if you want to make this share hidden, we need to append a $sign to the end of the share name. Now again, we can change the name of the share if you like. It won't change the actual folder name. So let's just change this name. Let's just change this share name to Private. And we'll leave the $sign added at the end of it to make it a hidden share. Now as you can also see, we can limit the number of users that can simultaneously access our share as well, and this defaults to 10. And we could also add an optional comment about this share and what its intended purpose is. Now if we click on the Permissions button, this here is referred to as the Access Control List, and it's what most users that have looked at shares before will recognize, as this is unchanged from previous versions of Windows. Now, but I'm going to skip this for the moment, and we'll talk about permissions shortly. Now the final option we have here is caching, and if we click this, we can configure the ability to make the contents of our shared folder available offline if we like. Now offline files allows us to cache a copy of network files we access via the share locally on our computer, so that way we can still use the files even if the shared folder is not available, and that can be rather useful, but of course it takes up more disk space on our local computer. Now the default here is to only make files and folders available offline if the user specifies it. Now we can change this so that all files and folders will be made available offline once we first open them up, or we can disable files from being made available offline altogether. Now since the use and configuration of offline files and folders really warrants its own discussion, I'm going to leave this here and I'm going to cancel this for the moment, and we'll just click on OK and then close, and we can see up here that our management folder is in fact now shared. But if we go back to our network folder, here it is, and even if I hit F5 to refresh this, you'll notice that our hidden share that we created, which was called Private, doesn't appear in this list. So we will need to type it in explicitly if we want to access it. So at the top here, if I just type in /, you can see that it's already located these three shared items, but to add our private folder, we'll simply enter in Private followed by the $sign and hit enter. And now we're inside the new share, which is called Private $, and of course that is pointing directly to our management folder. Now even though we weren't able to browse our hidden share like we could our standard shares, there are a couple of ways to view hidden shares. The first is by using the Computer Management Console. So if we go back here, and over on the left hand side we'll expand Shared Folders, and then we'll click Shares. In the middle here you can see all of the shares on this computer, whether they're hidden or not, and of course all of the ones with a $sign are hidden shares. Now some of these shares here are system shares. Admin, C$, and IPC are all created by default when you first installed Vista, and these are the same in older Windows operating systems as well. Now about this C share here, by default all drives are given a hidden share at the root of your hard drive. Now this share is known as an administrative share and it can't be removed. You can, however, right-click on this share and then choose Stop Sharing, and that'll stop it from being shared, or you can go to the Services console and you can stop the service which is responsible for managing file sharing, but as soon as you reboot Vista, this share will be back. So if this is a problem for you, you could simply write a startup script that stops sharing, and when you do reboot, the share will then be removed again each time you restart your computer. Now this admin dollar share is like $C in that it's an administrative share, but rather than mapping to the root of your drive, it maps directly to the location that Windows is installed in. So if your copy of Windows Vista is installed in the Windows directory on your C drive, like you see here, then that's what the admin dollar will map to. Now why this is important is that sometimes people like to install Windows in non-default directories. So this mapping of admin dollar share will always take you to the right place regardless of where Windows is installed. Now finally, IPC is a widely used share for managing named pipes. Named pipes are actually bits of memory that are used to handle communication between two processes. Now when you connect to another server to perform some sort of administrative task, you actually map a drive. This IPC share manages this communication. So here, you'll notice that it doesn't actually have a folder path like the other two do. With the IPC dollar share, you can't actually connect to it like you would a regular folder. Now the other way of viewing shares on your computer is to use a command prompt. So we'll come down here, we'll click on Start, we'll type in CMD, and we'll hold down Control and Shift and hit Enter, and that'll open up our command prompt in administrator mode. And now we'll simply type in net share and we'll hit Enter. And here you can see in the results we have the same information that we saw in the computer management console. The name of each share, where it points to, and any comments. Okay, well the final thing I want to talk about with shares is how to map a share to a Windows drive letter. Because quite honestly, sometimes you'll want to use shares quite frequently, others you won't, but when you have a share that you happen to use a lot, it makes a lot of sense to assign that share to a drive letter so that it's easy to find when you need it. Well, since I'm already here in this command window, one of the ways is to use the netuse command. And this method is frequently used in logon scripts, so it's a good method to know. So we'll type in netuse, and if you don't add any arguments, this will firstly tell us what shares that we're currently connected to, which in my case isn't any. So let's use the netuse command to map a drive to a remote share. Now we firstly need to provide a drive letter that we wish this map drive to use on our computer. So pick a letter that's not in use, and I'm going to use the Z drive for my example. So we're going to type in netuse Z followed by a colon. However, as a side note, if you're unsure of what drive letters you do have available, you can either open up Windows Explorer and take a look, or simply replace this Z colon with an asterisk, and then the next available drive letter will automatically be chosen for you. Okay, now we'll need to type in our path to the share. Now the first part we need is either the computer name or an IP address. Now in my case, it's this computer here, so we're going to type in the name of this computer, which is Vista Client 01, and then we'll need to enter in the share name. So let's just use our sales share that we created a moment ago. Okay, so our full command here is netuse followed by the drive letter that we want to map this to, followed by the host name or IP address of the computer we wish to connect to, and then the share name. Now if we hit enter, we can see that our command completed successfully. So if we go and click on Start and we'll fire up Computer, there we can see our sales share, which is now accessible from this computer using the drive letter Z. And this will act like any other regular drive on our system. Now if we no longer need this share to be mapped, we can simply right-click on it and choose disconnect, or we could do this from the command prompt again. Oh, and by the way, if I was to reboot this Vista machine right now, you'd also find that this share would be removed, so it's referred to as a non-persistent mapping. Okay, so let's go back to our command prompt, and to remove our shared mapping, we'll simply type in the netuse command, followed by the shared drive letter of Z, and then we'll add the /delete switch, and we'll hit enter. We can see that drive Z was deleted successfully, and if we go back to Windows Explorer, you can see that our shared drive has disappeared. Now the share is still there, of course. We haven't deleted the share, we've just deleted the drive mapping. So if we wanted to go and create this share again, but this time make the mapping persistent so that it will still be there when we reboot Vista, we can simply issue the same command as before, which is netuse followed by a drive letter and then the path to the shared folder, but this time we'll add the persistent switch to the end with the word yes after it. Now, if you are connecting using an account that doesn't have the correct permission to access shares that require passwords, this command will prompt you to enter in the username and password of an account that is authorized to connect. But if you want to provide a different username and password, you could then try this option. We'll enter in the same command again, followed by our password. So I'm just going to enter in a password, hypothetically of password here, and then the user that you wish to connect as. And an example of the correct syntax would be like this. Okay, so what we're going to be connecting as is a user called Bob from a domain called Winstructor. Or if you prefer, you could also use a user principal name, and for the same user of Bob at Winstructor, we'd enter his user principal name in something like this, which looks kind of like an email address, bob@winstructor.com. Now, the downside of this, of course, using this type of command, is that obviously your password here is going to be displayed on the screen for anyone who's passing by to see. Now, you can, of course, simply leave this password out of the command, and then you'll be prompted to type it in. Okay, well, that's the command line method. It's very simple and it's quick, but let's now talk about using the Windows GUI to map our shares. Now, to do this, we'll go and click on Start, and we'll right-click on Computer, and then we'll choose Map Network Drive. Now, in the new dialog box that opens up, we can simply choose a drive letter from any of the available drive letters we have on our machine, and then here, under the folder path, we'll need to type in the share path. So again, I'm just going to use Vista Client 01 followed by sales. And all we need to do now is simply click Finish. Now, if you do want this drive mapping to be persistent, then simply leave this box checked, and this share will be retained even after you reboot. But if this is just a temporary thing you only need while you're logged on for this session, then you can uncheck this box. Now, if you do need to provide a different username and password to connect to this share, simply click on this different username hyperlink, and you'll be presented with this username and password box. So enter in your details, click on OK, and then your new share will be mapped using these credentials. Okay, so we'll click Finish, and it automatically opens up our new share, but if we just go back to our computer, there we can see our new share has been mapped to the drive letter we selected. Alright, now that we've seen how to share files and folders from both the GUI and the command window, let's go and take a closer look at the properties of a shared object and its permissions. So let's go back into our C drive, and we'll right click on, say, our management folder here, and then we'll choose Properties, then the Sharing tab, we'll choose Advanced Sharing, and we'll click Continue, and finally we'll click on the Permissions button. Now, when we talk about permissions, we're generally referring to one of two types of permissions: share permissions and file permissions. Now, this window here obviously refers to share permissions. So what's the difference between share and file permissions. Well, these share permissions you see here are applied every single time that a user accesses a file or folder across the network or via a UNC path, but they're not applied when the user accesses the file or folder whilst logged on locally to the computer. Now, file or Ntfs permissions, on the other hand, are applied all the time, regardless of where you're accessing that file from. However, just to confuse you a little, if you happen to be accessing a file across the network, then both the share and file permissions apply. What happens in this situation is that the share and file permissions are then compared, and the most restrictive permission is applied, and I'll talk a little bit more about that in a moment. So by default here, our new share permissions are set to allow everybody the read permission. Now, simply put, what this means is that everyone that connects to this share as it stands right now will be able to view any files contained in our shared folder, but they're not going to be able to save, delete, or modify them in any way. So let's demonstrate this. Now, I'm currently logged on with the trainer account, which is an administrator account, but this share only has this permission assigned to it: everyone read. And everyone means everyone, including administrators. So if I go back to my C drive, and we'll go into our management folder, and I'm going to right click here and I'll choose to create a new text document. As you can see, it's successful. Why? Because I'm logged on locally. Those share permissions we just looked at are not applying to me at this stage, so I can create the file since only the Ntfs file permissions are applying. But if I go up the top here to our Explorer bar, and I'm going to type in the share path of Vista Client 01 / private $, and we'll hit enter, and we can see we're still in the same folder, but we're accessing it via a UNC path. If I choose to right click here, and we'll go and create, say, a new bitmap image, there you go. I'm denied access, as both the share permissions and the Ntfs permissions are now applying. So the Ntfs permissions are saying that I'm able to create files. The share permissions don't. So what happens is these permissions are joined together, and then the most restrictive permission then applies. The most restrictive permission in my case is read only. So that's what I get when I'm accessing the share remotely. Now, when we talk about share permissions, keep in the back of your mind that share permissions represent the maximum amount of access that you can expect to get on the inside of the share. So to clarify this, as we just saw, that if your access to the share is read, then no matter what permissions you have on files and folders on the inside, read is the best that you're ever going to hope to get. So if you have the change permission on the share, yet there's another folder inside of this one that gives you full control, your effective maximum permission for the share and all of its contents becomes change. Okay, well, back to our share permissions. We've got 3 share permissions listed here. We have full control, change, and read. Now, as obvious as it sounds, full control means you have full control. With this permission, you can perform any and all functions on files and folders within the share. The change permission gives you the ability to read, execute, modify, and delete files and folders inside the share. And finally, read means you can read and execute files and folders, but you can't modify or delete anything or add any new files to the share. Now, also note that the Everyone group is the only group listed by default, and we don't see the administrator account listed anywhere. That's okay, because the local administrator has full control by default. But if you want to provide full control to your remote administrators, you'll need to explicitly add these permissions to the share, and we just saw how me, as the administrator, was also denied the ability to create files, even though I am logged on with an administrative account. Okay, so to add a user or group to our share permissions, we'll simply click the Add button, and now we can either type in the name of a user or group or click OK, or we could browse for a user or group by clicking on the Advanced button and then choosing Find Now, and then simply locate the user or group you wish to add, and we'll add in Bob here, and we'll click OK. We'll click OK again, and there's Bob's account being added to our access control list. Now by default, the new user we just added, Bob, also only has the read permission. Now Bob is a user just like everyone else who is automatically assigned the rights of the Everyone group. Now, we just explicitly added Bob's user account to the share permissions, and as you can see, it defaults to read. So in effect, this has done absolutely nothing to improve Bob's abilities to do anything but read items in this share. Now, if we want Bob to be able to modify files and folders within this share, we could simply change Bob's permission, and we'll change it to say change, and then click on OK. Now, Bob has read assigned to him as part of his membership in the Everyone group, and he has change assigned to his account directly. So which permission wins? Well, when dealing with multiple permissions like this, where a user may be assigned different permissions by being a member of multiple groups that are assigned to this shared folder, we simply just add all of Bob's permissions together, and the best permission wins. Now in this case, change is better than read, so as far as Bob's permission goes, he gets change. Now one thing we haven't looked at yet is the effect of this deny column here. You have to be careful with deny entries, as they're not as straightforward as they appear. A deny entry will override an allow entry. So let's go back and look at Bob here. Suppose that Bob was a member of a group called Sales. Now if we decide that only the Sales group are allowed to read the contents of our private share, we would assign the Sales group the read permission. But what about the Everyone group? Well, the first reaction might be to select the Everyone group and then click on the Deny box to deny everyone else access. But who's part of the Everyone group? Everyone, including all of those members of the Sales group. This means that the share permissions are calculated together, and even though the Sales group might have read access, it's overridden by the deny permission, and then the Sales group would be denied access. Now in this situation, the solution would be to remove the Everyone group from the permissions altogether, so we'd simply highlight it and choose remove, and note that I do say remove, not deny. So to remove any users from our access control list, simply highlight the group and then click remove. Now in this case, the Sales group would then have read access and everyone else would not. Now if for some reason you do want to deny access to certain people or groups, there's no problem with doing that. Just be careful that users or groups that are allowed to access the share are not members of a group that you're denying access. Now if in doubt, it's best to either explicitly list the users separately, then deny them, or place them all into a new group and deny that group access, or simply leave them out altogether and then remove the Everyone group like I just did then. Now deny entries don't only allow or deny complete access. Consider a situation where your account might have full control on the share, but you also belong to a group that has the change permission on this share and it's set to deny. Now even though you might have your full access on one hand and a deny change on the other, this deny change has just taken away your ability to modify, create, and delete files. Now as a result of this, your effective permission is now read only. So the rule here is always be careful when performing deny entries. Oh, And by the way, let's say our user Bob here neither has an entry in the allow or the deny column, then Bob is automatically denied access as a result. Okay, well, we've just taken a good look at share permissions, so let's move on and we'll discuss file and Ntfs permissions. So let's just go back to our C drive here and we'll right click on another folder. We'll use our management folder again. We'll right click, we'll choose properties, and this time we'll choose the security tab. Now by default on a new folder, we have 6 sets of permissions at the bottom, plus an entry called special permissions, which we'll discuss later. And files have 5 permissions and this special permissions option. But obviously files won't have this permission here called list folder contents. Okay, so the permissions we have full control, which grants the user or group unrestricted access to the file or folder so that they can read it or run it, change it, delete it, or do whatever they want to it. We've got a modify permission, which allows users to change the file. So if it was a Word document, for argument's sake, they could open the file and make changes to it. Read and execute allows you to open files and run applications, but you can't change them. List folder contents, as it suggests, lets you open up folders to see what files are inside. And finally, we have the read and write permissions as well. Now, hidden from view from this window, there are actually 13 other permissions that you also need to be aware of. Truth be told, there's actually 14 in the list, but the first one is full control, and that's just the equivalent of having all of the other 13 permissions, so I won't include that one. Anyway, here's a list of these permissions. Now, the best way to read this table is to read down the columns. So let's take the read and execute column. A user or group that has been assigned the read and execute permission for a file or folder then has the following permissions. They can traverse folders and execute files. They can list folder contents, meaning they can browse the contents of the folder, and read data, meaning they can view the file's contents. They can read the attributes of the file or folder, and these are things like viewing the archive bit and read-only, hidden, or system files. They can also read extended attributes, which are things like the subject, the author, and copyright information on documents. Finally, the read and execute permissions gives you read permissions, and this is not like read data above. This is the ability to display the permissions of the file or folder on the security tab to see who has what access. This is read-only access to these permissions, however, you can't change them. Now, comparing this read and execute permission to the full control permission, for example, you can see that with the full control permission, it has every permission available and there's no restrictions on what it can't do. Now, you might notice that some of these permissions in the left-hand column do have 2 permissions. The reason for this is that Ntfs permissions apply both to files and folders. So if we consider the top one here, traverse folder, execute file as our example, you can't traverse through a file to get to another file, and you can't execute folders. So basically what happens here is when you attempt to open a file or a folder, the Ntfs permission takes a look at the object to see whether it's a file or a folder. If it's a folder, the traverse folder permission is applied. If it's a file, the execute file permission is then applied. Alright, so back on our desktop here, the default Ntfs permissions that are applied to our management folder here are authenticated users have the ability to modify files and folders. System has full control, and this is an inbuilt permission, so we don't have to worry about this one. Administrators also have full control, so they can do everything to files and folders, and users has read and execute permissions. So regular users will be able to come into our management folder here and run applications and read files. They just won't be able to delete or modify anything. Now, if we want to change these default permissions, let's say we want to add our user Bob here to be able to modify files in this folder, we can click on the Edit button and then click Add. Now we'll type in Bob and we'll click the Check Names button, which will populate Bob's account details here, and we'll click on OK. Now there we can see Bob's account has been added to our access control list. So if we wanted him to have, say, full control, we could simply click on the full control box in our Allow column. And of course, if we wanted to deny him access, and only him, then we could check any of the boxes in the Deny column so he can't get into this folder. So let's just leave Bob's access at, say, Read and Execute. So I'm going to uncheck these two top boxes, and I'm going to uncheck the right box at the bottom here, and we'll click on OK. All right, now I mentioned special permissions earlier, and if we scroll down here, we can see special permissions at the bottom. I said I'd come back to this topic, so let's get into it. Special permissions are simply the term used for custom permissions. So our user, Bob here, we can see he has the Read and Execute permission, but let's say we want him to be able to change extended attributes on files. Well, we could assign him the Write permission or Modify or Full Control permissions, and he'd be able to do this, but we're giving him way too much access to perform one task. Now the solution is hidden under the Advanced button. Now when we click on Advanced, we can see Bob's account listed here with the Allow Read and Execute permission. So we'll click on the Edit button, and then we'll click Edit again. Now here we can see our 13 permissions that I mentioned earlier, and full control being the 14th permission. Now remember, we wanted our user, Bob in this case, to be able to write extended attributes. So we just need to click on Allow Write Extended Attributes. Now before we go and click on OK though, at the top here in this drop-down box, you can see that these permissions are going to apply to this folder, any subfolders, and any files created beneath this folder. So if you want to change this option just for a single file, folder, or subfolders only, you can choose those options here. Anyway, we're done, so I'm going to click on OK, and notice here that Bob's permission has now changed to special. Now when we click on OK and OK again, we can see here that Bob has the special permission box checked. And it is grayed out, so we can't make any changes to it here directly. We have to go back into our advanced permissions to do that, but it does provide a visual cue that Bob's permissions have been customized. Now while I'm on the subject of these grayed out permissions here, and let's go and choose another account. Let's say we'll choose the users group. Now notice that down the bottom here, all of these permissions are grayed out. That's because these permissions are being inherited from something higher up in the chain. Now inherited permissions were first introduced in Windows 2000 and of course is here in Windows Vista. Inheritance, simply put, means that a folder uses the permissions of its parent. In essence, the folder with inherited permissions really has no permissions of its own. Everything is assigned at a higher level. So since we're currently looking at the users group permissions that are assigned to our management folder and they're inherited, the next folder up the chain must be the root of the C drive, since the management folder lives in the root of our C drive. So I'm going to go and cancel this for a moment, and I'll go back to our computer, and what we'll do is we'll right click on our C drive and we'll choose Properties, and then we'll choose the Security tab. Now we'll select our users group again, and we can see that this time our permissions are not grayed out, and if we want to change permissions, we can do that here. And notice up in our list here we can't see Bob's permissions as they've not been inherited. Why? Because we explicitly added permissions for Bob further down the directory tree. Now I want to make something clear right here. Don't think that just because you want to change a users group's permissions on the management folder that you have to do it here. No, not at all. This is simply where the default permissions start And whilst you can change things here at the C drive, and these permissions will filter down to new folders that you create, it's not recommended that you change things here. Why? Because let's say that we change our users group's permission to full control here. Now this means that every new folder that we create will inherit that same permission. So in essence, every user will get full control over anything we create, and that's not a good idea. So let's go back into the properties of our management folder again, and we'll select our security tab. So if we wanted to change this folder to have full control for our users group, we can override the inherited permissions, and this way the members of a users group can have full control over this folder only and not all folders, such as would be the case if we made this change on the root of the C drive. So to do this, we'll need to click on the Advanced button, and then we'll click the Edit button, and we'll need to first uncheck this box to stop inheriting permissions from the parent folder, which in this case is the C drive. Now when we uncheck this box, we'll get this new window appear that allows us to copy all of the existing permissions that are already assigned to this folder, or to remove them. Now in most cases, you'll probably want to keep the existing permissions, so we'll click Copy, and then we'll click OK, and OK again, and notice now that our permissions are no longer grayed out, as they're now being set right here at this folder, and they're not being inherited from the parent folder. So now we can click on the Edit button, we can select our users group, and then we can change the permissions as we like. So we could grant the users group full control if we like, and this will take effect for this folder only, and of course any new folders that we create inside this folder, as anything that goes inside this folder will inherit its permissions from its parent, which of course is this management folder. And it's important that you understand how this works, as now you can be very general or very specific with permissions, so that you can either open up the whole system so that everyone gets full access, or more preferably, you can lock it down so that only users or groups have access to what they need. Now once you start becoming familiar with share and Ntfs permissions, it can be quite confusing to identify which users or groups has what permissions when you're dealing with files and folders that are nested deeply inside other folders. Now this is where we can use effective permissions to find out what permissions people have on our system. So if we click on the Advanced button and then choose the Effective Permissions tab, this feature, which was introduced in Windows 2003, takes the guesswork out of determining the permissions of a user or group. So we'll come over here to the right, we'll click on the Select button, and we'll enter in the name of a user or group that you want to query for their effective permissions. So let's use Bob again as our example. So we'll enter in Bob, we'll click the Check Names button, and then we'll click OK. So now we can see the effective permissions that Bob has to this object, whether it be a file or a folder. So this is a rather useful tool to find out exactly what permissions a user or group has to a particular object, as it can be rather confusing trying to figure it out by yourself when you've got a lot of files and folders to deal with. Now whilst this is a great tool, there are some things to take into account when you use it. Firstly, the Effective Permissions tab doesn't take into account any share permissions. It only looks at Ntfs permissions. So whilst it might be saying, look, Bob here has full control for argument's sake, if the share permission says Bob doesn't have any access at all, then Bob won't have any access when he's connecting remotely. Now this Effective Permissions tab can't also calculate effective permissions for the domain users group if you're a member of a domain, as it doesn't calculate permissions for domain groups that are nested within local groups, as is the case with the domain users group being nested inside the local users group. And finally, it doesn't take into account the multiple SIDs that an account may have. For example, users logged on with a terminal service SID can't be calculated properly with this tool. Now, even though the Effective Permissions tab here does have some of these limitations, it's still a useful tool to be aware of, and for the vast majority of tasks, you'll find yourself quite happy with the results that this tool produces. Alright, now, whilst we're here in this window, let's take a look at another tab we have here, the Owners tab. Now, it's very likely that at some stage in your life as a Windows user or administrator, you're going to come across a situation where no one, including administrators, can access a file. Now, this problem can occur when you remove everyone from the access control list on your security tab of the file properties, or you've removed a user from the computer and they still have some files hanging around. Of course, you need to have permissions to be able to assign permissions. Now, fortunately, this thing here called ownership is here to help you out. Now, the owner of an object by default is the creator of the object, such as the person that created the file or folder, and they have the ability to assign permissions. So you can see here that this folder, the management folder, was created by me using the trainer account, and as such, I am the owner of the folder. Now, I could change the owner if I like by simply clicking on the Edit button, and we'll click Continue. And if the other owner I want to choose isn't an administrator and not in this list, we can click this Other Users and Groups button, and then we can choose to grant another user ownership to this file or folder. But in most cases, you'll likely only use this feature for reasons that I mentioned earlier, such as you've removed the user's account and they've got old files hanging around that you want to be able to use, or perhaps the user in question has created a file or a folder and removed access to everyone else, and you need to look at this file for whatever reason, and they aren't around to grant you access. So to demonstrate this, let's just close all these windows here for now, and we'll go and take a look inside another users folder. So we'll go to our users folder on our C drive, and I'm going to dig here into Bob's folder, and we'll go into his documents folder, and here's a folder called Private, which I've gone ahead and removed all access to. So the only person who's listed on the access control list is Bob with full control. So if we try to get into this folder, you can see that we are in fact denied access, even though I'm logged on as an administrator. So even if we try and click Continue to get access to this folder, this will invoke user account control. We'll click Continue. We've still been denied access. Now, it does give you a little hint here. To gain access to this folder, you'll need to use the Security tab. All right, so what we'll do is we'll right-click on Bob's private folder here, and we'll choose Properties, then the Security tab. And you can see here that we're told that we will need to be an administrator to get access to view the security properties of this folder. So we'll click on Continue, and then Continue again. Now, we're logged on with an administrative account, but even we don't have access to this file or folder. However, we do have the ability to take ownership of this object, and down the bottom here you can see all of the accounts that have the ability to take ownership, and these are all of the administrative accounts. So to take ownership, we can simply select which account we want to grant ownership to, and then click on OK. Now, of course, if it does happen to be another user that we wish to grant ownership to, we can, of course, click the Other Users or Groups button and then browse for the user that way. All right, now we'll right-click on the folder again. We'll choose Properties, and now the Security tab. And now we can see that we do have access to this object, and we can go and change its permissions as we see fit. But do notice that we still can't actually get into the folder. We will need to first go in and add in permissions for our user account to be able to access the folder. Now, the final thing that I want to discuss in this video is auditing access to objects. Now, it's probably happened to you before. Someone's come along and deleted a file or folder, and you're out for blood. But of course, nobody owns up, which is one of the reasons why you'll be able to put the techniques in this video to use to lock down access. But sometimes you want to know who's trying to access files and folders as well as who's been deleting things. Well, if you want to be able to know exactly who's doing what as far as your computer goes, then you'll need to take a good look at auditing. I will point out though that auditing isn't very popular on client machines. It's really used more heavily in domain environments, but you can certainly audit Vista if you want to. Now, first of all, we will need to turn auditing on as it is disabled by default. So we're going to go and click on Start, Control Panel. We'll choose System and Maintenance. And down the bottom, we'll choose Administrative Tools. And then we'll launch the local security policy. Now we'll expand Local Policies, and then we'll choose Audit Policy. Now, since this is files and folder access that we want to audit, we'll need to enable the Audit Object Access policy. After all, files and folders are simply just objects. So we'll right-click on this policy, we'll choose Properties, and from here, we can choose to enable successful access to our objects or failed access to our objects, or even both. So for this example, I'm just going to choose both and we'll click on OK. Okay, we've just turned auditing on, but now we'll need to actually configure an object in which to audit. So what we'll do here is we'll audit access to our management folder and any other files and folders below it. So I'm going to click on Start, we'll open up Computer again, we'll go to our C drive, and then we'll right-click on our management folder, and we'll choose Properties. Now we'll choose the Security tab, and then we'll click the Advanced button, and now we'll need to choose the Auditing tab. Alright, well, as it says here, you will need to be an administrator to do this, so we're going to click Continue, and we'll accept this user account control message. Now firstly, you'll notice that down here, this Include Inheritable Auditing box is checked. Now this performs the same function as we saw with the Inheritable Permissions box earlier. So what it's going to do is to enable auditing to propagate to all files and folders that are below our management folder. Okay, so we're going to need to add a user or group to audit. But if we want to audit all access, we should just simply add in the Everyone group here. So we'll click on Add. But if you have your suspicions that a particular user is the troublemaker, then just add their account in here. Now for our example though, we're just going to add in the Everyone group. So I'm going to type in Everyone, we'll click Check Names again, and we'll click on OK. And this will pop up a new window which lets you specify the permissions you want to audit against. So in these two columns here, you can select to audit by successful or failed access by simply checking the appropriate box. Now if you want to audit absolutely everything, you can select all of these by simply checking the full control box. Now again, as with our permissions we looked at earlier, we can assign auditing to this folder, subfolders and files, which is the default, or we could change it to audit any of these other combinations. Now if you have made a mistake here and you do want to change the user or group that you're auditing against, we can just click on this Change button here, and then we can simply select a new target. So once you're sure you have everything right, we'll click OK, and OK again, and one more time, and we're done. Now a quick word of warning. Doing what I've just done right now and enabling auditing against everybody would cause a huge event storm if this management folder happens to be heavily accessed. So normally you wouldn't do this unless you had a real reason to, or you'd try and limit it to only specific users. Okay, so if I go back to our Explorer here and we'll open up our management folder, we should now have a record that I've been here. So let's go back to our administrative tools. I'm going to click Start. We'll open up the control panel, System and Maintenance, and down the bottom, we'll go to our administrative tools and we'll launch the event viewer. And on the left-hand side, we'll expand Windows logs and we'll choose the security log. And at the top here, we can see a bunch of auditing events that now show a trail of my behavior whilst I've tried to access the management folder. Okay, in this video, we've talked about share permissions, Ntfs permissions, and even how to audit access to our files and folders. We also talked about taking ownership of other users' files and folders and the reasons why you may need to do that, and we saw how to use the Effective Permissions tool to find out what permissions a user or group really has on a given object. Permissions, they're not all that difficult to understand, but they can easily confuse a newcomer, so hopefully now you understand how they work and how you can now use permissions to lock down access to your own files and folders.